You miss out on 100% of the ideas you don't think of. Boom. That's simple. Welcome to another episode of Power of Bourbon. Tonight we are doing, I have no idea. Just got here. So, CJ, what are we doing tonight?
I'm not in charge tonight. That would be Chuck.
Welcome to another episode of Power of Bourbon. These guys don't know what they're doing. I do.
Whoa. Are you sure you
prepared? I would like to say, everybody hold up their prepared cocktail. Okay.
Brian's never made an old fashioned. Oh.
Bourbon, neat. Prepared.
Bourbon, neat. Me.
So, tonight, Chuck, what are we talking about?
Tonight, on this episode of Power Bourbon, we're talking about old fashions, the bourbon old fashioned, the simple cocktail. It's Elijah Craig's Bourbon Old Fashioned Week coming up in October. So we thought it'd be fun to say, what is your favorite recipe of old fashioned? What are some do's, don'ts? What do you enjoy? What do you not like?
I mean, sometimes I like to share bourbon with people that might not be able to handle straight or not want watered down. They want a little bit of sweet. Heck, there's sometimes I want a little sweet. So like a go-to is easy, the old fashioned, very few ingredients to the cocktail, really, really simple. And heck, if you're like Chuck and you fly Delta, apparently they got old fashioned in a can that I heard is pretty dang good. We're getting ready to fly Delta coming up here next month. I'm gonna have to take a couple for the channel just for you guys. So
now for point of clarification, is that available maybe in first class only, TJ? And you might not make the cut.
First class or economy comfort for free.
Okay.
Comfort, whatever they call that now. But to be fair, and if you're flying economy, you can pay for it.
Okay. And depending on how many you have, is it worth potentially just upgrading?
Yes, always.
Because wow, that's quite an endorsement. They must be that good.
They are fantastic, actually. Yeah. So I'm old fashioned is my cocktail. I don't drink cocktails for the most part, but when I do, an old fashioned is my go-to. So and those ones on Delta are delicious.
Yeah. So we figured we would say kind of our do's and don'ts of old fashions. There's all types of ways to do it. You can put twists on them, all types of things. So we just figured we'd give you a couple recommendations. The best part about an old fashioned is experimentation. Get a bourbon or a rye that you really, really like and have fun. So my first recommendation is just to get a good, cheap bourbon, or actually I prefer rye because I like the rye spice to come through. So like Old Forester rye for $20, grab a bottle, play with it, have fun.
See, my first recommendation is going to be completely opposite of that. And then if you don't like drinking it neat, then you shouldn't put it in your old fashioned. I think your wife would agree with me. Like maybe a Four Roses barrel strength or something would go well in an old fashioned.
Yeah, she does. There's not a bottle on the shelf.
100% agree. 100% agree. It's like, put some good whiskey in there, because that's the beauty of an old fashioned. There's other cocktails where you're going to use more of a well mixer. So an Old Forester rye or something more typical like an Elijah Craig perhaps. But that's the beauty of an old fashioned, is that you want that bourbon flavor to come through. It's a simple cocktail, just really a few ingredients. So you got bourbon, bitters, a cherry, some kind of sweetener. Don't go heavy on the sweetener, and ice. Like that's it. Yeah. So let the bourbon shine.
So as the third wheel tiebreaker here, I'm actually gonna go with Chuck on this one. That with the old fashioned, I think your bourbon does matter because you're going to taste it. It's going to come through. So but that being said, you don't have to break the bank. So you can find something in that $20 range, $25 range that's going to go really good. So
that's high price for you.
That is. So
It's two and a half Hendersons.
That's 2.5 Hendersons exactly. So I'm probably not throwing the Henderson in the old fashioned, just because I like that straight. But yeah, I mean something like a Maker's Mark, Elijah Craig, is going to go really good. Old Forester rye, I was actually going to mention. If you're willing to go rye, I know probably some of the old fashioned like purists out there are like, it has to be a bourbon, compared to a rye, but again, it's your drink. Do what you want with it. And I think that's one of the pieces of advice in general with, how do you like your old fashioned? It's not about what it's supposed to be. It's about what do you like? So experiment with it. I love how you already mentioned experimentation. Do that. Experiment with it, tweak it, make it yours.
My second recommendation is if you're going to be doing this with other people, like making it as a cocktail for friends, then you gotta splurge a little bit. And you got to get some clear ice. So this is from a local company here in Kentucky, which is Kentucky Straight Ice. Like a tube of this is usually $5-6, but nowadays Liquor Barn, Westport, where I go, if you buy a specific bourbon, they throw in a tube for free. So I just pick up the bourbon or the rye that they're
for free.
Yeah, that they're doing it to make my old fashioned with, and then I get a free tube, which comes with I think 8 cubes, so I can make up to 8 beautiful old fashions.
So I'm going to continue the ice theme here. This wasn't planned, but I'm just going to go with it. My next recommendation is don't over ice. It's again, theme here is let the bourbon shine, and so if you put I'll go and order an old fashioned and they just fill the glass up entirely with ice. And I'm like, no, because by the time you finish drinking it, the ice is watered down, the flavor of the bourbon, and it's like you're just left with water. So go light on the ice. If you have a larger cube, that's best. Whether it's an ice ball, if it's clear, you're super fancy, squared, or just a couple cubes. You just want it enough to be chilled. Take that top edge off, be refreshing, but don't water it down. Advocate for drinking our bourbon neat here on Power Bourbon. But if you're a rocks drinker anyway, you just go light on the ice. And it's the same thing with the old fashioned. Go light on your ice.
Yeah, if you're somewhere, in a nice place getting an old fashioned, especially if you have a nice bourbon in there or whiskey, I wouldn't be afraid to say 3 ice cubes, like give them that number. I wouldn't hesitate to say 3 ice cubes, and then here's what I want in it, simply because you don't want it to be overly watered down. And I actually had light on the ice in my notes, so I'm going to jump to my next light item, which is light on the fruit. Okay, it's an old fashioned. It's not a fruit salad. I don't want 2 orange slices in there, 13 cherries, a lemon wedge, and whatever else is in the back of grandma's fridge. Okay. So for me, one of my things is
grandma's making an old fashioned you never turned in.
Yeah. So, a little bit of that garnish, maybe like some orange zest, maybe the lemon, but just a couple, and I would argue cherries, and specifically black cherries for me. You may have another preference, but just 1 or 2 black cherries. Perfect, gentlemen. We are of an accord. This is beautiful. So, but other than that, don't fruit it up. Okay. Don't fruit it up. 2 cherries. There you go.
All right. So my last recommendation is on the sweetener. Personally, when I make them, the one that I like to do and play with is I like to do maple syrup instead. And this is actually a bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup. So you get a little extra bourbon flavor in there. But if you don't want to... Yeah. But if you don't want to do that, which I get because maple syrup is pretty sweet, do the raw cane sugar. So your brown sugar. Don't do white sugar. It doesn't taste as well. So the raw cane sugar tastes a little bit better. Personally, like I said, I still like maple syrup the best. I think it gives it the best depth of flavor. But also don't be using Miss Butterworth. Be using pure real cane maple syrup. And yeah, so I always love that for my sweetener.
And I have similar comments on the sweetener, so I'm pretty particular on this. One is don't over sweeten it. So generally I ask, if I order it at a place, I always ask for half sweet. So whatever they're going to do half of what they would ever recommend. Of course, it's personal preference. So if you like things that are a little sweeter, you want less of that bourbon flavor, you can certainly take more of the sweetener. But that's one of the reasons I like that maple syrup, TJ. It is sweet, but you just do a splash of it, and it's perfect. As opposed to using a simple syrup or another traditional way to make it. You kind of have two different paths, I guess. A road was diverged in the wood, and I chose the road less traveled, which is the simple syrup. The other way to go is the sugar cube. So that's kind of the traditional way, is to you throw a sugar cube in, and that maybe the only benefit there is it's like a consistent sweetener.
Yeah.
It's the same size every time, and then you muddle that with a cherry and an orange slice. I like going the maple syrup route personally, and then because that's enough sweetener for me. And then not muddling the cherry, but putting in a little bit of the Luxardo cherry juice, or any of whatever your cherry of choice. I understand Luxardos are more expensive, but the jar lasts a long time. It's okay.
Yep.
And it's worth it. So yeah, go light on the sweetener.
And I agree light on the sweetener, but I'm going a little bit different direction. So, an old fashioned is usually one of my go-to drinks, like if I'm getting a cocktail out somewhere. But one of the better ones I had, and I was kind of like trying to think through, man, if I was really to recommend something, a friend of mine used to be a bartender. He made an old fashioned with the sugar cube method, and it was phenomenal. And so, it was the sugar cube, then you put a little bit of the bitters right there on it with whatever your zest, whether you're doing orange, lemon, whatever it might be. You can throw the cherries in at that point, or wait and muddle it up and kind of grind it. Then you add your bourbon and you mixed it up, and it was just, it was absolutely wonderful. And so, like, if I were to recommend something maybe just a little bit different, maybe than what you'll get at the typical bar, like if you're on your own, just want to do something different, I would actually recommend the sugar cube method. It was really, really good. And once again, you're kind of able to control the ingredients and how much was in it, and don't over sweeten it. And I think you'll really get a little bit of that sweet with a lot of the bourbon flavor coming through.
I have a few other, I was in the North Country recently, I won't say where, and they added seltzer and sweet and sour mix and called it an old fashioned, and that's never okay. That is not an old fashioned.
No.
So don't do that. That's fine if that's what you want to do. Just don't call it an old fashioned. It's a whiskey sour, or I don't know what it is at that point.
Yeah, if you see someone like long pouring the syrup, like, just send it back. Send it back.
So that's our thoughts, takes on a old fashioned. Let us know what you think. What's your favorite old fashioned? I know some people like to smoke it and do all types of cool things. What's your favorite recipe? But yeah, some days, apparently Brian doesn't, because he's always whiskey neat. But you got to branch out and have a couple cocktails, because it's just nice and refreshing. And so here's our thoughts on the old fashioned. And we'll see you next
literally
time.
The simplest cocktail in the world.
No kid.
Enjoy.
Our bourbon.